Caleb Maddox wasn't new to headlines, but this time it wasn't about his latest app or another billion-dollar valuation. It was about him, a leaked audio clip, a smug laugh, and a cruel comment about hiring less attractive people for better productivity. The internet tore him apart in hours. His board panicked. Sponsors pulled out. Protesters camped outside his office. Caleb watched it all unfold with practiced indifference, until his publicist stormed into the room, her phone still in her hand, eyes blazing. "You need an image reboot," she snapped, slamming the phone on the table. "And fast." Caleb leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You want me to start rescuing puppies on TikTok?" She didn't laugh. Instead, she opened her laptop, spun it around, and hit play. The video was grainy, taken at a grocery store. A man in a suit was berating a cashier about the price of oat milk. The cashier, plus size, unbothered, wearing a baggy apron and a tight ponytail, fired back with such razor-sharp wit that the entire checkout line burst into applause. The woman stared him down, handed back his receipt, and coolly said, "We don't do discounts for fragile egos." Her name flashed at the bottom, Maggie Johnson. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Who is this?" "Your fake girlfriend," his publicist replied. "If she agrees." He blinked. "What?" "Think about it. A charming, grounded cashier. Plus size, real, smart, the opposite of what people think you value. We stage a public relationship. You fall in love with someone outside your type. It humanizes you, rebrands you." Caleb stared at the screen, watching Maggie cross her arms as the man stormed away. The camera caught her muttering, "Some people really think the world owes them a filtered reality." "You're serious?" he asked. "As a heart attack." He hesitated for a beat. Then, with a slight smirk, "Let's meet her." Maggie Johnson had seen the viral clip a dozen times. Her co-workers had shown her. Her aunt had forwarded it. Some girl from high school messaged, "Queen behavior." It was funny, until it wasn't. Now strangers were tagging her, calling her a hero. A podcast wanted her on as a guest, and then Caleb Maddox's assistant emailed. She thought it was a scam, until they offered to fly her first class to Manhattan for a brand partnership meeting. She nearly deleted it, but curiosity won. She'd never been to New York, and she had vacation days to burn. Now she was standing in a glass conference room, wearing her cleanest jeans and a borrowed blazer, while a billionaire tech CEO strolled in 5 minutes late. Caleb was sharper than he looked online, taller too. No filters, just smug confidence, tailored clothes, and teeth that could blind you under fluorescent light. "You're Maggie," he said, like he was still trying to believe it. "And you're real," she replied, arms folded. "Weird." He smirked, but her tone made it clear she wasn't here to be charmed. His publicist launched into the pitch, a fake relationship, a rebranding arc, curated appearances, staged photos. Maggie would be paid, protected, and given final say on the narrative. A contract slid across the table. Maggie didn't pick it up. "So let me get this straight," she said. "You want me to pretend date a guy who mocked people like me so you can look better?" Caleb opened his mouth to defend himself, but shut it just as quickly. "I get it," she continued. "I'm a story, a twist ending. Look how enlightened he is now. But here's the thing, I'm not your punchline or your redemption arc. If I do this, it's on my terms." Caleb tilted his head. "And those are? You don't touch me without asking. You don't talk down to me. And if I feel humiliated once, I'm out." There was a beat of silence. Caleb glanced at his publicist, who looked mildly worried. Then he turned back to Maggie and extended his hand. "Deal," he said. She hesitated, then shook it. Her grip was stronger than he expected. The first time Maggie Johnson stepped out of a black SUV with Caleb Maddox, the cameras didn't know what to do. She wore a deep green dress that hugged her curves unapologetically. Her hair was pulled back tight, lips painted a bold matte red. Caleb, in his usual tailored navy suit, looked calm until the flashes started. They were attending a charity gala in Tribeca, and the press had been tipped off. Maggie Johnson, Activist and girlfriend of Caleb Maddox, the headlines read within an hour. Inside it was all polished marble and soft jazz. Caleb moved through the room like a shark through calm water. But Maggie held her own. She made conversation with a senator's wife about food deserts in the Midwest. She roasted a venture capitalist for confusing gentrification with progress. When someone whispered, "She's so confident for her size," Maggie smiled sweetly and replied, "Confidence isn't size exclusive, but ignorance might be." Caleb overheard that one and nearly choked on his champagne. Later on the rooftop, he offered her a glass of wine. "You don't drink, do you?" she asked, taking the glass anyway. "Only when I'm nervous." She raised an eyebrow. "You're nervous?" Caleb leaned on the railing, glancing out over the skyline. "They're not used to seeing me with someone who doesn't orbit me." Maggie sipped her wine. "Good. Let 'em sweat." He turned toward her. "You handled that room better than I ever have." "Yeah," she said casually. "It's called having to prove yourself your whole life. Builds muscle." For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Caleb asked, quieter this time, "Are you okay with this?" Maggie looked at him, really looked at him. His confidence had cracks, his armor had edges worn thin. "I'm not your prop, Caleb," she said, setting the wine down. "But if I'm your partner in this, for however long, then I expect respect. That's it. You give me that, I'll handle the rest." He nodded, and for the first time that night he looked almost grateful. The next morning, Maddox's mystery woman trended for 6 hours. But Maggie wasn't a mystery. She was the storm coming. Caleb's penthouse had never looked less inviting. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the skyline like a showroom piece. Polished concrete floors gleamed under strategically placed LED lighting. Everything was monochrome: blacks, grays, expensive whites, and not a single photo or object that looked even remotely sentimental. Maggie stepped inside and blinked. "Wow," she said flatly, dragging her suitcase over the threshold. "I thought the inside of your apartment would at least try to pretend people live here." Caleb arched a brow. "What's that supposed to mean?" She dropped her duffel onto the nearest velvet bench and looked around. No magnets on the fridge, no snacks in the pantry, no books, no mess. Just an espresso machine that probably costs more than my car and a giant mirror over your bed. Caleb smirked. "That's custom, actually." "Of course it is," Maggie muttered, tugging off her sneakers. "This place doesn't feel lived in. It feels pretentious." "It's curated," Caleb corrected her, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. "No, it's cold," she replied, tossing her hoodie onto a minimalist chrome bar stool. "You don't decorate your life, you stage it," he gave a sarcastic smile. "Thanks for the input, Martha Stewart." Maggie ignored him and wandered into the kitchen. "Where's the cereal?" "I don't eat cereal." She pulled open a cabinet. "Of course you don't." "You'll find kombucha in the fridge," Caleb added, still watching her with an amused expression. "And organic almond flour crackers. If you squint, they almost taste like cardboard." Maggie slammed the cabinet shut. "If I wanted to chew drywall, I'd hit up a construction site." Caleb chuckled. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" She turned to face him, arms crossed. "Look, I get it. This is your territory. Big shiny apartment. Billionaire furniture. You've got everything lined up just right. But don't expect me to pretend this setup makes sense." "You're living here rent-free," Caleb said coolly. "All I ask is that you try not to set fire to anything." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "No promises." Later that night, they found themselves in the living room, trying not to talk. Maggie had taken over the corner of the couch with a blanket, a bowl of microwave popcorn, and a rerun of a cooking competition show on the TV. Caleb sat a few feet away, laptop open, glancing over occasionally. At one point he muttered, "You seriously watch this stuff?" Maggie didn't look away from the screen. "It's called stress relief. Something you clearly don't understand." "I don't get how watching someone overcook scallops is supposed to be relaxing." "Because," she said, popping a kernel into her mouth, "sometimes it's nice to watch people crash and burn without being the one on fire." He looked at her for a second, then back to his screen. "Poetic." "Thank you," she said, her tone dry. Now shut up, they're about to vote someone off. The next morning, Caleb found Maggie in the kitchen frying an egg in one of his pristine pans. "I didn't know you cooked," he said. "I didn't know you owned a stove," Maggie replied, not looking up. "It had dust on it." Caleb leaned against the fridge. "You're really making yourself at home." "Well, I figured since I'm the one bringing warmth and personality to this icebox, I might as well start with breakfast." He rolled his eyes. "Charming as always." As the days wore on, the snark continued, but so did something else. Curiosity. Maggie noticed the way Caleb always left his shoes by the door, perfectly aligned. The way he ran every morning at exactly 6 a.m., returning flushed and silent. The way he checked his phone during meals, but always tilted it slightly away, like he didn't want her to see what was on it. And Caleb noticed her, too. The way she hummed when she folded laundry. How she always adjusted the thermostat 2 degrees higher. How she left sticky notes with sarcastic reminders on the bathroom mirror. Don't forget to moisturize that ego. One evening, he came home to find Maggie sitting on the floor, back against the couch, typing on a beat-up laptop with a cracked screen. "Writing a manifesto?" he asked. "Budgeting," she replied without looking up. "For what?" "For life," she said. "You should try it sometime." He wanted to make a snide remark, but instead he asked, "Need a better laptop?" Maggie looked up sharply. "No, I need you to stop thinking every problem is fixed by throwing money at it." He nodded slowly, then walked into his bedroom without another word. Behind him, Maggie blinked. For once he didn't push back. And for some reason that unsettled her more than any of his usual arrogance. One late night, Maggie padded into the kitchen, barefoot, her ponytail undone and trailing down her back. She was half asleep, just looking for a glass of water. But something felt off. The air was still, the apartment too quiet. No tapping of laptop keys, no low phone calls from Caleb pacing around the living room. Just a faint, uneven sound, quick, shallow breathing. She followed the noise, peering around the corner. That's when she saw him. Caleb sat hunched on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands tangled in his hair. His shoulders rose and fell in uneven rhythms. The phone on the coffee table glowed with a notification. Investor pullout confirmed. He hadn't noticed her. He was staring at the floor like he couldn't look anywhere else. Maggie hesitated for a second, then stepped forward. "Caleb?" He jolted slightly at the sound of her voice. Then, as if flipping a switch, he straightened up and tried to compose himself. "I'm fine," he said quickly. She frowned. "You're obviously not." He forced a weak laugh. "I'm just tired." "You look like you're about to pass out," she said, walking further into the room. "You're having a panic attack." "I'm not," he muttered, eyes darting away. "You wouldn't get it." "Try me," she said. There was a pause. He dragged both hands down his face, exhaling hard. "2 more sponsors bailed today. That's 5 this month. I keep telling everyone we're stable, but we're not. It's unraveling, and I can't seem to stop it." Maggie sat down on the edge of the rug across from him. "Because of the clip." "That. And me," he said quietly. "People think I'm some genius, some visionary, but I don't even know if I'm good at this anymore. I haven't slept in days. Everything I say gets twisted. I walk into meetings and feel like everyone's just waiting for me to fail." He let the words hang in the air, then added barely above a whisper, "It's like I'm wearing a costume, and someone's going to tear it off and see there's nothing underneath." Maggie didn't speak right away. She just sat with him in the silence. After a moment, her voice softened. "Yeah, I know that feeling." He glanced up at her, surprised. "Different reasons," she added. "But same sensation. People think they know you from a headline or a single glance. They don't see the rest. They don't care to." Caleb looked at her, his expression still guarded, but something was shifting. She wasn't teasing him. She wasn't mocking him. She was just present. "I didn't expect this from you," he said after a beat. "You're more tolerable when you're quiet," she replied, standing up. As she walked past him, he called after her. "Maggie." She turned back. "Thanks." She didn't smile, but her eyes lingered on him for a second longer than necessary. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's another day for the internet to hate you." And then she was gone, down the hall, her footsteps fading. Caleb leaned back on the couch. His breathing had slowed. The storm inside had calmed, if only slightly. Someone had seen past the image tonight, not the publicist, not the press, Maggie, and she didn't walk away. One afternoon, the fake couple did another interview. Caleb sat in the guest chair with practiced ease, one ankle crossed over the other, while Maggie looked far less comfortable in hers. She smoothed the fabric of her wrap dress for the third time and avoided eye contact with the cameras. Her expression, however, stayed composed, determined even. The host opened with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Caleb Maddox, welcome. And Maggie Johnson, this is your first time on camera, isn't it?" Maggie gave a polite smile. "First time being framed as a social experiment, yes." The host chuckled nervously. "Fair enough. Let's get right into it. This relationship surprised a lot of people." Maggie tilted her head slightly. "Because I'm not someone you'd expect to see next to him, right?" The host faltered. Well, no, I mean," she leaned forward, voice steady. "Let's call it what it is. I'm not model thin. I wear budget shoes, and I speak my mind. I get that it doesn't fit the narrative." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "She also makes better points than half my board." The host, clearly flustered, turned to Caleb. "What drew you to Maggie?" Before he could answer, Maggie cut in with a smirk. "He insulted my apron. I insulted his personality. It was romantic in a deeply unmarketable kind of way." Caleb glanced at her, amused. "To be fair, your apron was aggressively orange." "And your shirt cost more than my monthly rent," Maggie replied dryly. "We both have regrets." The audience laughed. The host regained his composure, smiling as if everything was going exactly to plan. "It seems like there's chemistry here," Maggie shot back. "It's not chemistry. It's shared trauma from media training." Caleb chimed in with a chuckle. "We bonded over how much we both hated the talking points." The host finally gave in to the energy of the room. Okay, real talk. Maggie, what's it like being thrust into Caleb's world?" She paused before answering. "Confusing, loud, filtered. Everyone wants a piece of you, and nobody wants to hear what you actually have to say. At first I thought it was just a bunch of noise, but then I saw how much pressure he's under, how many people are always watching." Caleb looked over, surprised. Maggie turned to him. "You live in a glass house, Caleb, but it's also a pressure cooker." The audience quieted. The host cleared his throat. "You're defending him." Maggie shook her head. "No, I'm acknowledging him. Big difference." There was a beat of silence. Caleb spoke softly. "Thank you." She met his gaze, but didn't smile. "Don't let it go to your head." After the segment wrapped, they stepped out of the studio and into a quiet hallway. The click of Maggie's heels echoed as she walked ahead. Caleb followed beside her, unsure what to say. He finally broke the silence. "You didn't have to go that hard for me back there." She shrugged without turning around. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because I'm tired of people pretending I don't belong in the room." He hesitated, then said, "Still, thank you." This time she looked at him. "You're welcome. Just don't expect me to make it a habit." As they exited into the night, Maggie pulled her coat tighter around her. The air had cooled, but something between them had warmed. Just a little. "You handled yourself well," Caleb said. "Better than most execs I know." "I handle unhinged coupon ladies and people yelling about almond milk shortages 5 days a week," Maggie replied. "You think I'm scared of a man in a blazer with a teleprompter?" He laughed. "Honestly, no." They stood beside the car in silence for a moment. Then Maggie said, softer now, "You're not what I expected." Caleb looked at her. "Neither are you." And for a brief moment, they weren't CEO and cashier, not billionaire and grocery store warrior, just two people, unexpectedly aligned. Later that week, Caleb and Maggie walked through a quiet farmer's market tucked between old brick buildings. It wasn't their usual scene, no paparazzi, no curated lighting, just mismatched booths, fresh produce, and a jazz duo playing near the corner. Maggie had insisted they go somewhere normal. Caleb had reluctantly agreed. She picked up a bruised apple and examined it like it owed her money. "Tell me again why apples are $4 each when they look like they've been drop-kicked through traffic." Caleb shrugged. "You're the grocery expert. Enlighten me." Maggie snorted. "I'm an expert at deflecting complaints, not fixing food inflation." They walked in silence for a moment before she added, "Still beats being gawked at in a rooftop bar." Caleb glanced sideways. "You're saying this is better than the artisan mezcal tasting with the seaweed garnish?" "Wildly better," she said. "For one, I don't have to hear someone say the phrase, bone broth cocktail." He smiled, but noticed how her shoulders had tensed. They passed a booth selling handmade soaps, and Maggie slowed, suddenly more serious. "Can I ask you something?" she said, eyes still focused on the rows of lavender bars. Caleb nodded. "Yeah, of course." "What's the most humiliating thing you've ever let someone say to you, just to keep the peace?" The question caught him off guard. "Wow, that's oddly specific." Maggie looked at him now. Her voice was quieter. "My ex used to call me his guilty pleasure on camera." Caleb's smile faded. He'd post photos with captions like "Real men love curves" and talk about how brave I was for existing in public, she said, all while pushing this brand about body positivity and being woke. I was his mascot, not his girlfriend. Caleb stopped walking. "Jesus, Maggie," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The worst part, I thought it was love. I thought the world seeing us meant I mattered, but I was just a prop." He didn't know what to say at first. The air felt heavy now, the soft music from the jazz corner fading into background noise. Finally, Caleb spoke, his voice gentle. "I'm sorry." Maggie looked down at her shoes. "He was the first guy who made me feel like I wasn't invisible, and then he turned me into a symbol. I became a thing he used to look better." "I'm really sorry," Caleb repeated. "You didn't deserve that." She gave a small nod. "It's why I didn't want to do this, you know? This fake relationship thing. I didn't want to be some narrative arc for a redemption tour." Caleb's chest tightened. "That's not what you are, not to me." Maggie looked at him carefully, as if trying to gauge whether he meant it. He opened his mouth, tempted to share something, anything, about the pressure he felt, the mistakes that haunted him. But the words stuck. It wasn't the right time. Or maybe he wasn't ready. Instead, he said quietly, "You're the only real thing in this whole mess." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the scent of herbs and fruit, the buzz of quiet conversation around them. Maggie hadn't said much the night before. She'd skipped dessert, disappeared early from the living room, and shut her door quietly without a word. Caleb noticed, he always did, but figured she needed space. The next morning, she was already in the kitchen before him, making coffee in silence. Her hoodie sleeves were pulled over her hands, and her eyes looked like they hadn't slept. Caleb entered slowly, careful not to disturb whatever cloud she was under. He opened the fridge for orange juice he didn't really want, just to be near without pushing. "You okay?" he asked eventually, keeping his voice soft. Maggie didn't answer right away. Then, without turning around, she said, "Today's the anniversary." Caleb closed the fridge door. "Anniversary of what?" "My brother's death." That froze him. "I didn't know you had a brother," he said gently. Maggie nodded faintly. "Most people don't. He died when I was 16. He was 19, overdose." "I'm sorry," Caleb said quietly. She sipped her coffee. "He was buried somewhere on the edge of the city. We moved not long after, and I never found the cemetery again. All I remember is a church with peeling paint and a pond nearby. My mom used to leave roses in a coffee cup." Caleb watched her for a long moment. "Do you want to try and find it?" Maggie blinked. "What?" "Today, I mean. We've got time. I can drive." Her lips parted slightly, surprised. "You'd do that?" "Sure," he replied. She stared at him, then gave a slow nod. "Okay, yeah, let's try." They left half an hour later. Caleb had already pulled up a list of cemeteries that matched her vague description. Rural, near water, with a chapel nearby. He didn't talk much on the drive, just played soft music and let the GPS guide them from one spot to another. At the fourth location, Maggie went quiet in the passenger seat. "That's the church," she whispered. It was small and sagging, its white paint flaking like old parchment. A still pond shimmered nearby. They parked and walked through the gravestones in silence, eyes scanning names. Maggie stopped suddenly. "Elias Johnson," she said aloud. The headstone was modest but well kept. The dates read 1991-2010. Beneath it, a short inscription. Always the loudest laugh in the room. She crouched slowly, brushing dirt from the edges. Her hands trembled just a little. Caleb stood a few paces back, unsure whether to move closer. "He used to make me act out old SNL sketches with him," she said. "Told me we were going to write our own show someday." Caleb swallowed. "He sounds like someone I would have liked." Maggie touched the stone gently. "He would have made fun of your shoes." Caleb looked down at his designer sneakers and chuckled. "Fair." They sat together on the bench nearby, watching the breeze ripple across the pond. The silence wasn't heavy, it was sacred. After a while, Maggie turned to him. "You went through all that effort. Why?" Caleb looked back at the water. "Because it mattered to you, and because, I don't know, it felt like something I could actually do right." Maggie studied him for a beat. "Most people avoid grief. You walked right into it with me." They sat there a while longer. Then Maggie reached out just briefly and laid her hand over Caleb's. He didn't say anything, didn't move. And in that quiet, her walls lowered just enough to let him in. Late one evening, Maggie was flipping through her emails in the kitchen when her phone buzzed, blowing up with messages, tags, and news alerts. Confused, she clicked on the first link a friend sent her. It led to a gossip blog post with the headline, "Caleb Maddox's romance is a PR illusion. Source confirms Maggie Johnson was paid to play girlfriend." Maggie's heart dropped. The article had screenshots, emails, alleged contracts, and grainy paparazzi photos captioned with mocking headlines. The same moments that had felt real to her were now stripped down to captions like "carefully staged" or "Oscar-worthy." Her stomach turned as she scrolled further. Online, people were already tearing her apart. Again. But this time it wasn't about her body. It was about her integrity. She was being called a liar, a grifter, a plant. And the worst part? It wasn't completely false. The early agreement had been staged. But what they had now, what she thought they had, felt real. She'd let herself believe in the Caleb she saw after midnight talks, quiet drives, and shared vulnerability. The man who sat beside her at her brother's grave, the man who held her gaze just a second too long. And now, it all felt like a setup. Maggie stormed into the living room, holding her phone up like it was on fire. Caleb was on the couch, laptop in his lap, typing furiously. His forehead was tense. He didn't even notice her until she was standing in front of him. "You need to see this," Maggie snapped, her voice sharp with betrayal. Caleb looked up, sensing the weight in her tone. He took the phone from her, scanned the article, and muttered, "Damn it! You knew this was coming?" Maggie's voice rose. "No," Caleb said quickly. "But I should have. I've been dealing with a journalist poking around, but I didn't think—" "You didn't think to warn me? I didn't think they'd go public with it," he said, standing now. "It was just background digging." "So, you were talking to press behind my back?" she asked, eyes narrowed. "No," he said firmly. "I wasn't feeding them anything, Maggie. You have to believe that." "Do I?" she fired back. "Because from where I'm standing, this whole thing looks exactly like what people said it was from the beginning." Caleb ran a hand through his hair. "It wasn't supposed to go like this." "Supposed to?" she repeated, her voice incredulous. "God, listen to yourself. You still think this is some curated narrative?" He opened his mouth, but said nothing. And that silence cut sharper than any response. Maggie stared at him, her voice trembling now. "You're still in it, aren't you? Still running everything through a filter of optics and outcomes. You don't even know when you stopped pretending." Caleb flinched. She continued, quieter but more devastating. I was starting to believe in you, that you were more than your image, that this, whatever this is, meant something, but you're still managing it like a campaign. I never meant to hurt you, Caleb said softly. That's the problem, Maggie replied. You never meant anything. You just let it happen. You wanted redemption without risk. She stepped back, as if the room itself had become toxic. I thought we were building something, she said, but you're still protecting your image, and I'm just the collateral damage. Caleb's voice caught. Maggie, please, don't walk away. But she already had. The front door clicked shut with a finality that echoed louder than any fight. Caleb stood there, phone still in his hand, laptop still open, news alerts buzzing in the background. But all he could hear was the silence she left behind. When he glanced at his reflection in the black screen, it looked foreign, and maybe so did he. So, Maggie didn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned in the guest room of Caleb's apartment, the glow of her phone screen flickering with headlines and DMs that cut like glass. Every few minutes, another notification, another accusation, another person deciding who she was without knowing anything about her. And Caleb, he hadn't knocked, hadn't texted, hadn't even slipped a note under the door. By morning, she was already packed. When she stepped into the living room, he was there. Slumped on the couch, laptop still open, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept either. For a brief second, she hesitated. Then the memory of the blog post flashed again in her mind. PR plant or love fraud? She dropped her bag with a thud. You used me, Maggie said, her voice sharp but not shouting. Not yet. Caleb looked up, startled. Maggie. Don't, she cut in. Just answer the question. Was this whole thing just a strategy? Caleb stood, rubbing his face. No, not like that. Then tell me how it was, she snapped. Because from where I'm standing, it sure looks like I was your little redemption project. Caleb stepped forward, voice low. I never saw you that way. No? Maggie asked. Because it sure felt like you liked having me on your arm when it served the story, the rebrand, the softened billionaire who fell for the unlikely girl. That's not fair, he said. Oh, it's not fair? Maggie scoffed. You think it was fair when my face was plastered across gossip blogs or when people started sending me threats? You think it was fair that I found out about a leak with my name on it from Twitter before you even said a word? Caleb's jaw clenched. I didn't know it would come out. But you knew it could, she said. And you didn't prepare me, because deep down, you didn't think it mattered. That's not true, Caleb replied, quieter now. Then what is? Maggie asked. Because if you cared, you'd have told me. If any of this meant something to you beyond image, you would have let me in. Silence. Caleb finally sat down, his voice raw. It did mean something, it still does. Then why did you keep me at arm's length? Maggie asked, her voice cracking. You've been in my world. You've seen my family, heard my stories. You held my hand at my brother's grave, and yet I don't know anything about you. Not really. I'm not good at being known, Caleb said, his voice barely audible. Maggie crossed her arms. Then maybe you shouldn't be in a relationship. I didn't mean for it to become one, he said. That sentence landed like a slap. Caleb saw the pain in her eyes instantly and winced. I didn't mean that. I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect you. Maggie blinked hard. That's the problem. I did expect you. I knew the second this started that I'd be a footnote to your redemption story. But I let it happen because, for a while, you made me feel like it wasn't a performance. Caleb looked up at her, eyes glassy. It wasn't. Then prove it, she said. He hesitated. Then he stood. When I was a kid, Caleb began, we didn't have a dining table. We ate off boxes. My mom worked doubles and still couldn't afford heat in the winter. I used to pretend I liked the cold just to make my little brother laugh. Maggie didn't interrupt. One day, I promised myself never again cold, never again powerless, so I built walls, chased control, and somewhere along the way I stopped believing people could care about me if I wasn't winning." His voice faltered. "And then I met you." Maggie swallowed hard. "You didn't care about the packaging," Caleb continued. "You challenged me, mocked me. You made me earn it. And I didn't know how to handle that. So I kept one foot out the door, just in case it fell apart." Her arms slowly dropped to her sides. "I don't want to live like that anymore," he said. "I'm tired of playing games with people's feelings. I'm tired of hiding." A long beat passed between them. Then Maggie shook her head. "It's not just about hiding, it's about choice. You chose not to tell me the truth. You chose to prioritize your fear." "I know," Caleb whispered. "And I'm sorry." She stepped back, tears forming but not falling. "I can't be your crash test dummy while you figure this out." "I don't want you to be," he said. "But you already made me one," she said. She grabbed her bag again. He didn't stop her. But just before she reached the door, she paused. "I meant it," Maggie said softly without turning around. "All of it. I didn't fake a single second." Then she left. And for the first time in years, Caleb Maddox stood in his own silence. The tabloids had a field day. Maggie Johnson leaves Billionaire's penthouse in the dead of night. Publicity stunt crumbles. Was it ever real? And just like that, Caleb Maddox vanished. No press statements, no social media posts, no photos outside his office. His luxury car sat untouched in its parking spot. The startup headquarters where he once ruled every meeting now operated without him, like a ship moving forward without its captain. People speculated. Was he hiding? Was it guilt? Was he abroad? Maggie, for her part, said nothing. Back at the grocery store, she clocked in for her usual shift. The managers didn't mention anything. The customers gave her a wide berth. One older woman gently touched her shoulder in the freezer aisle and whispered, "I believed you." Maggie had to fight the lump in her throat all the way to the stockroom, but it wasn't the stares that bothered her, or even the whispers. It was the quiet. Late at night, when she kicked off her shoes and sat down with a cup of tea, she expected to hear that telltale chime, the one that always came a few seconds before Caleb texted her something ridiculous. A meme, a sarcastic quote, a selfie from the couch with a caption like, "Guess which billionaire forgot to buy toilet paper?" But her phone stayed silent. And then the dreams started. Not romantic ones. Just simple moments like Caleb sitting at her mom's table, peeling an orange, and pretending he knew how to do it without spraying juice everywhere. Him reading the back of cereal boxes like they were philosophical texts. Him brushing past her in the kitchen, mumbling something about the inferior architecture of toaster ovens. It wasn't his money she missed, or his status. It was him. The guy who looked completely lost in a food pantry. The man who couldn't keep plants alive but remembered her brother's birthday. The one who tried to make her laugh when she wanted to cry. The one who shared pieces of himself without realizing how rare that was. One afternoon, Maggie found herself sitting on the back steps of the grocery store during her break, chewing on a protein bar that tasted like damp cardboard. She opened her phone. No texts, no missed calls. She clicked on Caleb's name in her contacts. Her finger hovered over it. She didn't press it. Instead, she scrolled through their last conversation. It was short, tense, ended with her walking out. She remembered how angry she'd been, how hurt, and she didn't regret any of it. But now that the storm had passed, she could also see something else in his eyes that night. Something she hadn't wanted to look at then. Fear. Not of her, not of the press, of himself. That realization changed something. It wasn't about forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but it shifted the narrative in her mind. Caleb wasn't the villain anymore. He wasn't the polished tech god on a redemption arc. He was just a man who'd spent his whole life earning attention and didn't know what to do when someone tried to see him instead. And maybe, just maybe, that was why she missed him so much. The next day, she walked past the front of the old community center, where she used to volunteer before everything exploded. On a whim, she stopped inside. The staff greeted her with tired smiles and hopeful eyes. They handed her a clipboard without question. No cameras, no contracts, just purpose. She spent the whole afternoon filling food boxes and talking to kids, and that evening, sitting on her porch, she looked out at the city skyline, wondering if somewhere behind all those lights. He was thinking about her, too. It had been weeks since Maggie last spoke to Caleb, and though she never let it show, at work, to friends, even to herself, something in her still checked the headlines more than usual. Her thumb paused longer while scrolling. Her eyes scanned just a little slower whenever a tech article came up, and when there was silence, she wondered where he was. Then, one afternoon, her co-worker at the grocery store burst into the back room with a grin and a phone. "Your billionaire's back," she said, practically vibrating. "Look." Maggie took the phone warily. Her stomach dropped at the headline. Caleb Maddox funds grocery union expansion, creates scholarship in local name. There was a photo of Caleb, pressed shirt, serious face, no tie, standing with grocery workers outside a union meeting hall. The article outlined his recent donation to expand wage protections and workplace safety for food service employees across the state. And then, the part that made her knees feel weak, he had created a scholarship fund, in Jacob Johnson's name, her brother. There was a moment where Maggie just stared at the screen, unable to breathe. It was generous, deeply, but it was also public. She read the paragraph again, how it was part of Caleb's long-term community outreach restructuring, how the press had been notified, how there were already trending hashtags, and all she could think was, of course he did. Later that evening, just after closing her laptop, her phone buzzed. Caleb. She let it ring twice before answering. "Hi," Maggie said, voice even. "Maggie, did you see it?" Caleb's voice was low, excited, but with an undercurrent of uncertainty. "The scholarship, the union fund." "I saw," she replied. "I wanted you to know. I did it for you, for Jacob." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "It was thoughtful," she said carefully, "and it will help a lot of people. But you're not happy," Caleb said softly. Maggie exhaled through her nose. "You want me to say it was perfect. You wanted to fix things between us." I thought maybe it would show you that I've changed," he said, "that I heard you." She sat down, eyes on the floor. "You know what I heard today? That Jacob's name was trending on Twitter for the first time in his life. Because of you. Because of something you orchestrated." Caleb flinched. "I didn't mean for it to feel that way." "But it does," Maggie said. "It feels like a performance, a big, expensive apology dressed up for the cameras." "I wasn't trying to show off," Caleb insisted. "I was trying to do something meaningful." "I believe you," Maggie admitted. "But even now, you still don't get it. You're not trying to understand me. You're trying to manage me." Caleb went quiet. "You donated to a cause I care about," she continued. "You honored someone I love, and still, it was a calculated performance. Because it's always a show, always a move." Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. "I just didn't know what else to do." "That's the problem," she said gently. "You think love is something to earn back, something you fight for with strategy. But I never needed grand gestures, Caleb. I needed you to just be a person, to be present, quietly, without needing a scoreboard." His breath hitched on the other end. "I do care," Caleb said. "And I want to be the man who gets it right." "I know," Maggie said. "But until you stop performing, even your kindness feels transactional." She paused, her voice softened. "You're not a bad person, Caleb, but you are lost, and I'm not going to keep being the project you use to find yourself." He didn't argue. She added quietly, "What you did today, it was beautiful, really, and I'll never forget it. But if you thought it would bring me back, then you still haven't heard a word I've said." There was a silence between them that neither tried to fill. Finally, Maggie said, "I hope you keep doing good things, but not for me, for you." And then, with steady finality, she ended the call. Not in anger, not even disappointment, just clarity. Caleb stood alone in his apartment, holding the phone to his ear long after the line had gone silent. For the first time, he realized every good thing he'd done was still rooted in the same flaw, trying to win. He didn't sit down. He didn't calm lane. He didn't scramble to fix it. He just let himself feel it. And that, for a man like Caleb Maddox, was the first honest step he'd ever taken. Maggie heard it from someone else, an old friend of hers who worked at a non-profit media agency. The tech world was buzzing about a last-minute boardroom meltdown where Caleb Maddox had refused to approve a controversial acquisition. Apparently, the acquisition would have tripled their ad revenue, but it also involved absorbing a publication known for targeting vulnerable workers. And one of those hit pieces had been aimed squarely at Maggie. He didn't make a statement, didn't tweet, didn't leak it to the press. He just lost the deal. "What happened?" Maggie asked over the phone, voice low. Her friend replied, "He tanked the whole thing, walked out mid-meeting, told them they couldn't build something meaningful by stepping on people like her, like you." Maggie stood in the middle of her living room, phone still pressed to her ear long after the call had ended. He hadn't told her. No cameras, no spin, no grand gesture. It took her a few hours to decide. Then she put on her coat and left without overthinking it. She found him at his apartment, not the one with the perfect skyline view, but the small one-bedroom he'd kept for years but rarely used. The place was quiet, dark. A single lamp was on in the corner, casting a soft glow across the coffee table. Caleb sat on the couch, hunched over, in an old hoodie and sweats. His laptop was closed. His phone was nowhere in sight. Maggie knocked gently before stepping in. He didn't stand, didn't smile, didn't explain. He just looked at her like someone who had run out of things to pretend. Maggie walked in slowly, shutting the door behind her. The silence between them stretched, tense but not hostile. "You didn't return my messages," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "I figured I didn't deserve a reply. You didn't tell anyone about the deal." He exhaled. What would have been the point? Another headline? Maggie moved to the edge of the armrest and sat down beside him, not close, but not far. She looked around, no tech, no gear, just silence. "You really lost it?" she asked. Caleb nodded again. 3 board members walked out. Stock dipped. People are calling it career suicide. "And yet," Maggie said, watching him carefully, "you didn't try to spin it into a redemption arc." Caleb didn't answer. He just looked down at his hands. Maggie sat there for a long time before speaking again. "I spent so long thinking you were trying to win me back, like a brand rebuild, like I was just another feature update in your public image." He flinched, but didn't interrupt. "But this," she gestured around the room, the quiet space, the stillness, "this is different." Caleb finally looked up at her, his voice hoarse. "I don't know how to be anyone else, Maggie, but I'm trying to stop pretending, for once. And I'm okay if you don't forgive me. I just didn't want to keep being the guy who ruins everything he touches." She didn't rush in, didn't give him the comfort he might have wanted. She just watched him, really watched him. And in that moment, the man sitting beside her wasn't Caleb Maddox, CEO of Maddox Labs. He was just Caleb, flawed, exhausted, stripped of armor, and still there. "I'm not saying this fixes anything," Maggie said softly. "But it matters, that you did it for real, that you didn't turn it into a headline." He nodded once, slowly. She leaned back slightly and exhaled. "So, what happens now?" Caleb didn't move. "Whatever you decide. I'm not leading this anymore." They sat in silence, shoulder to shoulder, not touching, but not separated. For the first time, there was no campaign, no contract, just 2 people in a room, quietly beginning again. Just when things start feeling real and steady between Caleb and Maggie, she receives a life-changing offer. A national nonprofit coalition, deeply impressed by her authenticity and voice, wants her to lead a multi-city advocacy campaign, focusing on workers' rights and food insecurity. The role is prestigious, full-time, and based in Chicago. Maggie brings it up one evening as they're cleaning up dinner. Caleb smiles at first, genuinely happy for her. But as she explains the details, his face tightens. "You'd move?" he asks carefully. Maggie nods. "It's only a year, but yeah, I'd need to be there." On the ground. He swallows. "Right, of course. That makes sense." A long silence passes. She breaks it first. "You think I shouldn't take it?" Caleb shakes his head. "No, I just selfishly hoped we were finally starting something normal." "This is normal," she replies gently. "Real relationships have to stretch." He doesn't answer right away, and Maggie, suddenly nervous, continues, "This is everything I worked for. It's not about leaving you behind. But I can't shrink myself to stay." That hits him hard, not because it's unfair, but because it's true. For a moment, he feels the old instincts flare up, offer her funding, build her a platform, fix the problem. But instead, he nods slowly. "I don't want you to shrink," he says quietly. "I want you to take up as much space as you need." Tears prick Maggie's eyes. "Then maybe this time," she says, voice breaking, "we try long distance. The real kind. Not the PR version. Not curated. Just messy, honest, and completely ours." Caleb steps forward and touches her cheek. "If you'll have me, I'm in." The weeks after Maggie left felt like a strange dream for Caleb. His penthouse was quieter, somehow colder, even with the floor-to-ceiling views and the constant buzz of city life beneath him. He still had meetings, pitches, deadlines, but he moved through them like a man only partially present. Every evening, he'd close his laptop, make a late dinner, and stare at the space across from him at the table where Maggie used to sit, in oversized hoodies and messy buns, talking about unions and grocery clerks like they were superheroes. They texted often, FaceTimed some nights, but nothing quite replaced her physical presence, the way she took up space unapologetically, how she called out his nonsense without flinching, how she laughed too loud at her own jokes and never once apologized for it. One rainy Thursday evening, Caleb sat on the couch, phone in hand, watching her latest interview. Maggie had been speaking at a Chicago community panel about food deserts and minimum wage reform. She was brilliant, confident, fearless, and he had never felt prouder or more distant. When the screen faded to black, Caleb stared at his reflection in the blank phone. Then, without overthinking, he hit call. Maggie answered on the third ring. "Hey," she said, sounding tired but happy. "You watched?" "Of course," Caleb replied. "You crushed it." She smiled. He could hear it in her voice. "Thanks. It was a long day, but good." There was a pause, gentle but full of weight. Caleb exhaled. "Can I tell you something without it being pressure?" "Always. I miss you." His voice was steady but low. "Not just the texts or the calls. I miss you in this space. I miss you stealing my hoodies and leaving dishes in the sink. I miss you making fun of my pretentious kitchen knives and blasting 2000s playlists when I'm trying to read earnings reports." Maggie went quiet. "I know this time apart was important to you," he continued, "and I meant it when I said I'd support you. I still do. I don't want to guilt you or rush anything, but I also don't want to pretend I'm not hoping this distance has an end date. Eventually." After a long silence, Maggie finally spoke. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not making this about you, for saying what you feel and not trying to fix it. That means more than you know." They didn't resolve anything that night. They didn't need to. But the next morning, Caleb opened his door expecting a courier. Instead, he found Maggie, hair wind-blown, hoodie zipped halfway, suitcase in one hand, coffee in the other. "Hi," she said, almost shyly. Caleb blinked. "What? How?" "I took the red-eye," she said. "Don't make a big deal about it." "I'm not," he said, stepping aside, stunned. "I'm just happy?" "Yeah," he breathed. "That." She stepped inside. The apartment smelled like her favorite candles again. He'd kept them burning since she left. She dropped her bag near the door, looked around, then turned to face him. Caleb took a breath. "What about the campaign job?" Maggie held his gaze. "I quit." He blinked. "You what?" "I handed in my resignation yesterday," she said simply. "I've been talking about change, about fighting for what matters. And then I realized I was also allowed to choose joy, peace, us." Caleb's brows furrowed. "But it meant so much to you. I never asked—" "I know you didn't," she interrupted gently. "That's why I came back. Because you weren't trying to control me. Because when I needed space, you gave it. When I needed time, you didn't push. And when I was finally ready, I knew exactly where I wanted to be." He stepped closer, voice low. "Are you sure?" Maggie smiled. "We'll figure something out, together." He reached for her hand. She took it without hesitation. No grand declarations, no sweeping speeches, just two people choosing each other, quietly, deliberately. As they stood in the soft morning light, surrounded by candle scent and city silence, everything finally felt real, and this time it was. "So, what do you think? Should Maggie have forgiven Caleb after everything they went through? Did his transformation feel real to you? Or was it too little, too late? We'd love to hear your take in the comments. And while you're at it, tell us, what would you rate this story from 1 to 10? Thanks for watching, and if you want more stories like this, full of second chances, love, and emotional payoff, make sure to subscribe.